Hello everyone and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video for today, Tuesday, June 11th. If you're joining me for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is how today's video will be structured. We'll be going over a recap of yesterday's picks, seeing how they ultimately ended up turning out. After that, we'll get moved over to RotoWire and talk about the weather report, which is just going to be any game that does have a double-digit chance of rain for today. And then after that, we'll get moved over to FanDuel, talk about my core picks, which is going to be one pitcher, four hitters. It's going to be based on a combination of past performance versus their respective opponent, as well as some recent history. And then last but not least, we'll get moved over to my cheat sheet and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. That cheat sheet is 100% free and it's up on the Sports Affiliation website, so definitely be sure to check that out as you're building out your lineups for tonight's slate overall. But without further ado, we'll get started with a recap of yesterday's picks. So at the pitcher position, we went with Jose Berrios. He was $9,100, only got 20 points yesterday, so technically he was a miss. He got 5.2 innings pitched, so 1 out away from a quality start, which does have a pretty big impact for DFS just in general. Gave up 5 hits, 3 earned runs, 4 strikeouts. So not the greatest performance in the world, not like a performance that really truly killed us, but not a good one at the same time. So you could argue that maybe this is a push instead of a miss, but I had to give it a miss for yesterday's slate overall. Then at catcher, we had Salvador Perez, $3,200. But was looking for at least double-digit points on him. We only got 6.2, so did ultimately end up giving him a miss. And then in terms of Paul DeJong and Gavin Sheets, they were both $2,800. They both had 3 points, so both ultimately ended up being pushes yesterday. So not the greatest day for the White Sox overall yesterday. I know that game was like 4-4 in the ninth inning, and I didn't see the end result. And then last but not least, we had Fernando Tatis Jr., $4,000, got to 18.7 points, so he was our replacement for Aaron Judge, who ultimately did not end up starting yesterday, unfortunately. So not the greatest day in the world overall for a Monday, but for a slate that didn't have a lot of information going into it, obviously some of those slates are going to be a little bit more difficult. Obviously, it was a good day to mix and match just in general. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to RotoWire and talk about the weather report for today. So the weather report for today is going to be a real simple one. There is no games on the main slate today that do have a double-digit chance of rain. I believe the highest one was the Mets game, which has like 8%, and there's like another game that has a 4% chance, but everything else is 1% or less. So it looks like a great day for baseball overall, so not too much to talk about here. If anything does majorly change throughout the day, we'll leave it down in the comments below. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to FanDuel and talk about those core picks for tonight's slate. So once again, it's going to be one pitcher, four hitters. It's going to be based on a combination of past performance versus their respective opponents, as well as some recent history. I will say, keep in mind, these guys are not really set in stone today. These are just some guys that have some decent history in the past. So with that being said, if there's a certain player on here that you don't like, just don't play him. Play somebody else that you do enjoy or that you do like just a little bit better for today's slate overall. But these are the guys that I do have just in general. So at the pitcher position, we got Jesus Luzardo, $9,300. Got some pretty good history versus the New York Mets in his career. And with that being said, this year he had a start where he had 49 fantasy points against them. Last year he had 38 fantasy points against them. So some really good performances in that regard too. The ERA is kind of ballooned up once again to 5.3, only 2 wins on the season. So there is a little bit of concern there, but I do like his upside at $9,300. If you go back here, he was averaging just over 25 fantasy points per game. Obviously didn't have the greatest start to the year, then got hurt. And then the last 2 starts haven't been quite as good, but before that he had been pitching pretty well. And I do like that upside just against the New York Mets in general. Obviously, on a 12-game main slate, it's a good idea to mix and match at the pitcher position. You should not be playing Jesus Luzardo in 10 lineups if you're playing 10 lineups. Maybe play him in 3 or 4, and then kind of mix and match the rest of the way from there if that's something you want to do. Then at first base, we got Rowdy Tellez. He's only $2,300, averaging about 5 fantasy points per game on the season. So not great there. Obviously, kind of been more of a part-time player than maybe we even expected for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. Was off to a really slow start to the season, but he goes against Miles Mikolas today, who he is 6 for 18 with 2 home runs versus in his career. He has at least 1 hit in 4 out of his last 5 games. All 4 of those games have been multi-hit games. He does have 1 home run, 3 double-digit performances in all 4 of the games that he has had at least 1 hit. He has had at least 9 fantasy points in those games. So definitely does look like a really good play tonight overall. He is up to a 218 average, 2 home runs, 15 RBIs. Once again, only averaging about 5 fantasy points per game. Obviously, a really slow start to the season for him. Been a little bit more of a part-time player than we did expect headed into the year, but it looks like a really great matchup for him, and he's doing pretty well as of late. Then we're going to move down to second base with Marcus Semien here, $3,900, averaging just over 11 fantasy points per game on the season so far. And he is 4 for 16 with 2 home runs versus James Paxton, the expected starting pitcher for the Dodgers tonight. He has at least one hit in 8 out of his last 9 games. 2 of those games have been multi-hit games, 2 home runs during that time span, and 5 double-digit performances. So you could write home and say maybe that's not as great as you like for $3,900, but still does have really good high-end upside against James Paxton, who's had pretty good results this year, but he's not striking out a lot of guys. He's walking a lot of guys, so there is opportunities to be had there if you want to play Marcus Semien or any of these other guys in this Texas Rangers lineup. He's up to a 261 average, 11 home runs, 37 RBIs. Like I said, averaging over 11 fantasy points per game on the season, $3,900. Maybe a little bit more than I like to pay for him today just in general, but still definitely do like his upside overall. Then we're going to move down to Luis Rengifo. You can play him at second base, shortstop, or third base. Ultimately end up at third base here. He is kind of like my last guy in my core picks today, so he is probably the easiest one for me to swap off personally, though. $3,100, averaging over 10.5 fantasy points per game on the season. Goes against Jordan Montgomery tonight. He is 2 for 6 with 1 home run versus Jordan Montgomery in his career, so some pretty good history there. He has at least 1 hit in 6 out of his last 8 games, although only 2 of them have been multi-hit games and 3 double-digit performances during that time span. Rengifo got off to a really good start to the season. Kind of slowed down a little bit as of late, but I do definitely like the history versus Jordan Montgomery tonight, and Montgomery really hasn't pitched that great so far this season. He's come off a really, really shaky performance. So maybe with all that being said, maybe the Angels are a little bit of a sneaky stack today, and they are a team that has kind of hit left-handed pitching pretty decent so far this season. And then we're going to keep moving down to our last guy, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., $3,200. He is probably the first guy that I put in my core today. He's averaging just over 9.5 fantasy points per game. And he's going against the Los Angeles Angels tonight. It is Jose Suarez getting the start for the Angels. It is his first start of the season, probably not stretched out too far. So it might also end up being a little bit more of a bullpen game. Lourdes Gurriel is 3 for 5 with 1 home run versus Suarez in his career. He has at least 1 hit in 11 out of his last 12 games. 3 of those games have been multi-hit games, and he does have 3 home runs during that time span, 7 double-digit performances as well. So definitely do like the upside that Lourdes Gurriel provides on tonight's slate overall. He's at a 247 average, 9 home runs, 39 RBIs. Once again, averaging over 9.5 fantasy points per game. Maybe a little bit less than you like at a $3,200 player, but he's been playing really well as of late. But with that being said, if you go with these 5 players that I do currently have listed, you got $13,200 remaining, $3,300 per player. So a decent amount of money left over, whether you decide to pay up for some star players, pay down for some cheaper value options, or whether you decide to take a little bit more balanced approach for the rest of your lineup for tonight's slate overall. Definitely a lot of ways that we can do it. Obviously, like I said, with this core picks, if there's a certain player you don't like, just swap them out for somebody else that you do like a little bit better, or that maybe potentially fits with your stack a little bit better. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to the cheat sheet and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. So once again, the cheat sheet is 100% free. It's up on the Sports Affiliation website, so definitely sure to check it out as you're building out your lineups for tonight's slate overall. But in terms of my top GPP stacks for tonight, we have the Arizona Diamondbacks going against Jose Suarez of the Los Angeles Angels. Like I mentioned when I was talking about Lourdes Gurriel, it is his first start of the season, so it looks like a pretty good spot for them. The Diamondbacks do hit left-handed pitching pretty well. Suarez probably not fully stretched out, so this might ultimately end up being a bullpen game. And then Angels bullpen, not the greatest one in the world, so I definitely do like a lot of these Diamondbacks bats tonight. Whether that is Lourdes Gurriel, has got the good history versus Suarez in the past, whether it's Christian Walker, who I believe has never faced Jose Suarez. So a lot of different ways that we can build out that stack just in general. Then we got the Dodgers going against Dane Dunning. Not a long list of history there, but it's some pretty decent history at that. So whether you want to get to Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Kiki Hernandez, a lot of different guys that we can get to with this Dodgers team. Obviously, you can mix and match a little bit with that in terms of the Dodgers because you got the high-end guys, you got the little bit cheaper guys. Kind of ultimately depends on who ultimately ends up starting tonight. But a lot of guys that we do like from this team just in general. And then last but not least, we have the Guardians. They're going against the Reds tonight. It is probably going to be Brent Suter as the opener, Nick Martinez following him. We'll see how far he pitches in the game after that. So kind of a bullpen game for this Reds team tonight. They don't have a lot of history versus Nick Martinez or Brent Suter. So feel free to take advantage of this Guardians team just in general. I would say Jose Ramirez is definitely somebody that stands out. David Fry is 1-for-1, I believe, versus Nick Martinez. So if he's a guy you want to throw in there, definitely can do it. And just kind of mix and match the rest of the way from there. But, maybe 2 or 3 guys from this Guardians team might ultimately end up paying off in a pretty good way overall. But with that being said, that's what I do have in terms of the recap, the weather report, the core picks, and my top GPP stacks for today, Tuesday, June 11th. As always, if you have any questions related to MLB DFS, be sure to drop them down in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And then, as always, I'll be listing any weather updates that do come out throughout the day, any potential starting pitcher changes, as well as these starting lineups as they do get announced throughout the afternoon and early evenings. So definitely be sure to check those out as we do get closer to lock. But with that being said, if you are brand new to my channel, checking out for the very first time, or have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Right now, we have MLB DFS in terms of the core pick videos Monday through Friday. And then I do have my CFL DFS video coming out once a week, typically on Wednesdays. And then I will have my UFL DFS Championship, a single game slate video coming out this Friday. So be sure to check those videos out as well, if that's something you're into. And then last but not least, if you're interested in sports betting, if you're interested in prop betting whatsoever, be sure to check out the links and promo codes down in the description below for Prize Picks, Parlay Play, and BetUS. If you're a brand new user on any one of those three sites, when you sign up, make your initial deposit, you will get a first match deposit bonus. For Parlay Play and Prize Picks, it's a 100% match up to $100. And then for BetUS, it's a 125% match up to $2,500. So some pretty great opportunities to be had out there. And then with that being said, if you have any other additional questions related to that whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's down in the comments or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, and be more than happy to help you with that journey as well. But with that being said, that's all that I truly have for today's video. Definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS tonight.